That's an interesting effect.
I'll keep going. He's the 16th president of the American University of Beirut since September 2015. He's not just a hyphenated Lebanese American. He's fully Lebanese and fully American. He has held leadership positions at Emory University. He was chair of the Department of Hematology and Medical Oncology. He's editor of Cancer Journal and so many other things that I will not go into. But I thought, in the wake of the brilliant lecture of Amani Jamal last night about the Trump presidency and its implications for the Arab world and Muslims, I want to refer to a letter to the AUB community that Fadlo Khuri sent a few days ago. A letter where he affirms the primacy of values, American values, to be aligned with policies. And he states that those very values were at the founding of this university, and therefore this university continues to uphold those values. I thought it was worth mentioning for those of you who have not seen his letter to the AUB community. I'll make it available to you. I'm very pleased that he's accepted our invitation. He'll be speaking on the university as a model for a fair and just society.
Thank you very much, Tariq. Good morning. I'm not going to speak about President Trump this morning, so I'm sure that that topic will be well covered. I do want to make a point that for some of you who've known me a very long time, the two Samirs who've known me my whole life, I've always come to believe that the three major protectors of civil liberties are the free press, currently besieged in Lebanon, the universities, and the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court here does the best it can. I think they have a difficult situation. It was a little striking to me that we were the only free university that spoke up. So let's talk about the role of universities in achieving social justice in that context. So that goes back to what universities are really for. Were they created, and it's debatable, to serve society or to advance the individual? Is it their role to create wealthier, more successful individuals, or more successful and therefore wealthier societies? And by wealth, I'm not just talking about monetary wealth, but intellectual and other major, more meaningful means of wealth. So are universities engines of social change, or can they be philosophically neutral as to their impact on society? American University of Beirut was founded in 1866, unquestionably as the latter, as a societal change agent amid the conditions that it was set. Lebanon was a very different place in 1866 than it is today. And Beirut particularly, this area of Beirut was particularly different. It was not the vibrant, overcrowded metropolis of today. We should have no doubt as to what the original intentions were. When they said that they may have life and have it more abundantly, chosen from the New Testament, these words, chosen as the motto of the Syrian Protestant College, our forerunner, were used to articulate a religious objective when the college came into being. This was a university that came to convert. But the words carved on our main gate have remained conspicuous and relevant throughout our existence, as the idea of secular abundance took root in a place of the spiritual kind, but not a religious kind, a different type of spiritual kind, a societal spiritual kind. And this is very different than what was originally conceived. So let me be explicit in how I understand the phrase social justice. The International Forum for Social Development's 2006 report on social justice in an open world exclaims that, I'm going to read this because I want to be precise, that social justice may be broadly understood as the fair and compassionate distribution of the fruits of economic growth. And it goes on to stress that it will only flourish if environmental preservation and sustainable development constitute an integral part of the growth strategies, both now and in the future. It also states human beings are both guests and custodians of the planet Earth. And I agree with these objectives. This has been our strategy, more or less, that is being encapsulated in a series of tactics. So there are 4 areas that I'd like to explore that relate to the university's role in achieving social justice. First of all, making the university a safe space for student activism. I believe the university should foster student activism. It should not shy away from it. It should not allow it. It should encourage it. Creating a more sustainable and equitable economy, modeling a better and fairer society on campus, and finally, making sure to commit to engaged citizenship and outreach. So I'm going to start by talking about student activism and how you create an aware citizen. 135 years ago, this college stood at a crossroads. The dilemma was whether it should push forward with the mission of proselytization of the Protestant faith, of whom we're an example of the very few that were successfully converted, or follow instead the highest standards of scientific education. It should already have been clear by 1882 that conversions were not coming thick and fast, while the Assyrian Protestant College's secular education impact was transforming society. But that was the year when chemistry professor Edwin Lewis endorsed the theory of evolution by natural selection. With the missionaries viewing Darwin, even though he himself was in many ways a devout Christian, as an affront to Christian teaching, a furor ensued on campus. That was the first major academic crisis that was faced by this institution. Daniel Bliss then tries, as all of us know, to extinguish the dangerous new theory from the campus. But many professors stand firm with the students, demanding access to the most accurate and up-to-date knowledge grounded in science and research. This would be succeeded by other very good examples of students and faculty standing together in the early 20th century, late 19th, the Young Turk movement, for example. But one of the faculty who stood most firm was Cornelius van Dyck, who basically rejected the decision and threatened to teach evolution in his own house if necessary. Instead, he carried through with his promise after resigning and plunging the college into further crisis. The majority of the university's Arabic-speaking Orientalist professors, in the best sense of the word Orientalism, essentially withdraw from the university. We tend to think of this as a local phenomenon, but if you look at the study of education and student activism, the Lewis Affair is seen across the world as a vanguard movement for student empowerment and academic freedom. Students are expelled because they don't toe the line. So it's not for nothing that this institution holds its traditions of critical thinking so dear, but we uphold the right to create and disseminate the most advanced knowledge, regardless of religious or social taboos or political consequences. Since then, the students of this institution have shown an enthusiastic readiness to assert their positions when they haven't seen eye to eye with the administration. They've claimed their rights by dint of protests, occupations, direct actions. I'm not endorsing any of these, I'm simply stating them. Please don't occupy Marquand House. You'll find that the plumbing is a little bit old. So in the 1970s, this hit its aegis. There were huge protests organized to demand the reversal of increases in tuition fees, which the students felt unfairly targeted those less economically advantaged. And this was particularly acute for the children of Palestinian refugees. Remember, AUB did not have a significant financial aid portion. In fact, we had rules where you could not enter on scholarship. Maroon Saman, who made the largest gift in the history of the university, was very clever. He finished first in the baccalaureate, and then he got a Gulbenkian scholarship, which allowed him to enter, which allowed him to qualify for AUB financial aid. But you couldn't come in if you needed financial aid for that first semester. This resulted, the culmination of the protests, in 103 students being imprisoned and expelled, and some of those are really outstanding leaders in AUB society here and outside of AUB. The tuition fee protests in February 2014, just 3 years ago, saw some students declaring a pound AUB spring against the administration. So this is student activism, and for the most part, not in the 70s, but now it's been nonviolent. I have no problem in endorsing our students' right to protest peacefully, and I see it as a precious right that's been upheld and struggled for since the Lewis affair. Its absence is really the surest way for any leadership, country, or institution to get mired in error and a lack of accountability. I'm not encouraging massive protests that lead to nothing, such as what happened 2 years ago off campus. Social activism is important, but we have to agree that this is a precious right that's denied so many of the aggrieved populations around the Arab world, doubtless accounting for the sad state we find ourselves in as an Arab nation. So it's the job of a university to produce leaders of tomorrow who can strive for social justice and stand up for what they believe in, but who are clever in effecting that protest. And by clever, I don't mean devious, but I mean effective, who can effectively advocate for the rights of society. Candidly speaking, in my year and a half back, if we don't do that, who's going to do that? The right to protest requires that we foster safe spaces where everyone feels they have the right to speak truth to power, which can then kindle free speech. Every conversation, whether between student and faculty or junior and senior, should be conducted as an exchange between colleagues, each with the right to hold their own opinions and express their own views unhindered. And I have to pause here to remember something that Kamal Badr said very touchingly at one of these services for my late father. At his eulogy for my father, who was his mentor, Kamal Badr described his treatment, whether as chair of physiology or dean of medicine of his students, as junior colleagues, not as empty vessels to be filled with knowledge. All too often, we take a very high pedagogical stool, and then we cannot reach our students. Honestly, university's best hope, in my opinion, and something we have been doing to the best of our ability, but I wouldn't call it a success yet, is to foster such a dialogue between students and faculty. And the way to do that is to cultivate our students beyond just technical excellence. Whether they choose to become engineers or doctors or businessmen or women or any other profession that requires hard skills, the soft skills should never be dismissed. The ability to exchange words and to have a meaningful dialogue that's non-threatening. This is the intersection between culture and education, where universities have to play a major role in cultivating their students. And you've heard me use this phrase, inculturation, as I've called it elsewhere, the inculturation for AUB of a secular, democratic, liberal ethos, just as our predecessors sought to inculturate a Protestant religious ethos. So AUB adopts a liberal arts program, which means that whatever a student chooses to major in, they have to take courses in the humanities and the social sciences in order to graduate. We make it sound like it's a requirement. You have to take economics, you have to take social studies, you have to take history. It's not. It's actually a tremendous advantage. We have to make sure that in their university years, students learn about history, ethics, sociology, anthropology, philosophy, the struggle for civil rights. Let them find a passion in social movements, whether they use it or not. In their job, I assure you they will use it in their lives. Let them know about good and bad political systems. You have to have a frame of reference. If you've never seen a fair political system, you're going to assume that all the political systems are like the failed regimes we see in our part of the world. Regimes that, candidly, Dr. Mitri is one of the world's experts on, and why people don't create better regimes, to some degree they don't have a voice, and they haven't seen a better alternative. Let them learn how this society came to be, warts and all, the emergence of women in the public space, and what still needs to be achieved to gain equity, what's liberal democracy, what forces are pitted against it. But let's not whitewash it. Let's not have the American democracy as being the perfect ideal of all societies for all societies. People need to see the facts. I've long been against censorship. That's a challenge here. It exists in the baccalaureate program I studied in. The last page of our curriculum ended with the last French soldier leaving, and Lebanon and the Lebanese lived happily ever after in perfect unity. You think that this is just in history, but it's ominous. Even in Al-Banafsaj al-Tamuh, Gibran's favorite poem, it ends in the baccalaureate curriculum, as Dr. Mitri knows, with the violets chastising the violet that's become a rose for being too ambitious. But the real poem tells, or the real Nathar tells a different story, which I encourage you to find out for yourself. So how do we expect this generation to draw a difference between right and wrong when we censor reality? That's our role in this university. We have to provide them with, yes, the raw material to draw comparisons and extract their own conclusions. Let them know that their horizons are broad and without limit, that they can be leaders in free thought in a part of the world where it's most likely to be suppressed. That's how we create aware citizens and leaders of tomorrow. People who know how to think and how not to think. People who know right from wrong, who can listen to the facts and make the right decisions for themselves and their communities because they've seen difficult decisions before, because it's not the first time someone has thrust a difficult decision on them. I want to talk about equitable and sustainable economic solutions. I have two very distinguished economists, so I've got to be very careful here in what I say. So one of the qualities of the engaged global citizens whom we seek to create is that they don't just want to make better lives for themselves, but also to make the world a better place around them. Volunteerism, social outreach, and yes, even microphilanthropy. These are things I'm going to discuss shortly, but our citizen leaders of tomorrow have to be required not just to seek their own jobs, but to impact society ultimately by creating jobs for others. That way our graduates will play a role in the economic sustainability of the region. It's not enough to remain stuck to this fossil fuel and services and banking industry. We need creativity in fostering new solutions. So according to the objective indicators we see today, our Arab world stands at a point, if we don't find urgent remedies, we have no way to gauge how bad things may get. As I said last Friday at the launch of our AUB for Refugees Forum, we have to fix the problem before it fixes you. The wars that ravage this region are only part of the phenomenon. Allow me to extract data from the Arab Human Development Report of 2016, published by the United Nations Development Program, which was launched at a conference in AUB last December, and to admit candidly that it reminds me of hearing in the early 70s when I was a young man, Professor Samir Muqdisi talking about the lack of diversity in our economic plan, not just here, but for the Arab world, and foretelling of the challenges that we would have, which sadly are now clear. 60% of our region is under 30 years old, 60%. Potentially, these people could be an amazing resource of energy and growth for this region if a greater effort is made to include them in solutions from the ground up. On the other hand, if they're not included in the solutions, but the solutions are imposed on them, there is a good chance that our youth will continue on course to become more alienated, less constructively engaged, and if this continues, as in the report, a potent source of protracted social instability threatening human security, according to the United Nations. That's a dire prediction for the youth of the Arab world. I'm not reporting this study to scare us all into paralysis or what would be even worse, a hasty flight out of the Arab world. I'm saying it to spur us on to redouble our efforts to reach this really underserved sector and give hope for the future, real hope, not false hope as has been offered for generation after generation by demagogues and great speakers. We have the highest youth unemployment rate in the world, 30%. And the UN report continues by frankly exposing the problem of the inequality hidden in these figures, where the sons and daughters of our most powerful citizens get all the advantages to enjoy successful lives, undermining the principle that merit and hard work are what you need to advance in life. A few other world trailing figures that the Arab world can boast: the lowest participation of youth in the workforce, 24%, especially among young women, where the figure is 18%. The lowest level of political participation by youth, the lowest level of civic engagement among youth. Only 9% of young people across Arab countries ever volunteer with a civic organization each month, compared with 14% in the next lowest region, sub-Saharan Africa. So as we bring the MasterCard Foundation students on board and they experience challenges bedding in, I think we have a lot to learn from them, because they've seen real progress where we've stalled. Apart from our beleaguered youth, let's not forget that we have the lowest levels of women active in political institutions in the world, and it was particularly striking most recently when one woman was named to the Lebanese cabinet and a man, a fine man I might add, was named as the Minister of Women. It's only 22.5% around the world, so let's not pretend that the Western democracies have done a great job at this either. Although there was briefly the possibility that the leaders of the United States, Germany, and Great Britain would be women, it turned out otherwise. And so far, the performance of the leader of Great Britain is mirroring the performance of Mr. Trump. But I'm digressing here. It's 22.5% around the world. That's pretty shocking, but it's only 18.7% in our region. And although the Arab region is home to 5% of the world's population, it sees 45% of the world's terrorist attacks, produces almost 58% of the world's refugees, hosts 47% of its internally displaced peoples, and has 68.5% of global deaths related to armed conflict. Those are not things, ladies and gentlemen, that any region should be proud to lead in. For every young person directly killed through armed violence, ages 3 to 15, others are indirectly killed by medical complications, malnutrition, and treatable diseases, according to Save the Children. Meanwhile, 2 out of every 5 school-aged children in the Arab region are deprived of the right to an education because of armed conflict. 2 out of 5 can't study, can't go to school because there's armed conflict. So we in the Arab region are as far as one possibly could be from achieving a knowledge society and from developing the very knowledge economy that we've been talking about since the late 60s, early 70s. So we need to turn our region around and set it on the path to sustainable growth. According to that same report, by 2020, the region will need to create more than 60 million new jobs to absorb the number of workforce entrants and stabilize youth employment. Although our hopes of achieving this in 3 years are not that high, to say the least, we have to start somewhere. We can't just keep looking at statistics and candidly whining. And in this respect, every one of our graduates counts. That's my message to our university community. Every one of our graduates counts. Every student whose confidence grows from when they start your class to when they leave your class is a success story. Everyone whose confidence drops from when they start your class to when they leave your class is our failure. They have to enter the world not only with a mission to find a job, but also with a willingness to create jobs for others. This means unlocking the world of entrepreneurship, especially responsible entrepreneurship that can underpin sustainable development and that can teach our students that innovation in all spheres of work is within their grasp and holds the key to a better economic future for Lebanon and the region. 18 days ago, we launched our most ambitious campaign yet, Boldly AUB, the campaign to lead, innovate, and serve. One of the key pillars for the campaign, one of the 5, is fostering interdisciplinary innovation and entrepreneurship, and another is sustainability. And by that, we mean in everything, in the humanities, in the hard sciences, in engineering, in the social sciences, in public health. We believe firmly that these qualities are central to furthering society and are as important in the arts and humanities as they are in agriculture or architecture, engineering, and business. Our goal is to work with our stellar faculty, and I don't use that word lightly. I believe we truly have a stellar faculty to revamp our teaching methods across campus to put them at the core of our syllabus so that they truly are cutting edge and student-focused. And we will encourage our sister universities in Lebanon and across the region to do the same if they're not already there. Where they are better than us in something, we will learn from them, and we will share everything that we can achieve. I can already see many of our graduates leaning towards entrepreneurship, stirred on by the Circular 331 regulation that was initiated by the Banque de Liban to encourage startups and promote investments in new ventures. But my hope is that those who become fortunate will not forget those who are still less fortunate. We have this ugly phenomenon in Arab society called crabbing. Do you know what crabbing is? If you ever look at a bucket with crabs as you're about to select it in New England, you'll see the top crab is making their way out. What do the other crabs do? They pull them down. We need to get rid of this phenomenon in our society. We should celebrate success, and the top crab should pull the rest up as opposed to the other way. So my hope that we can help lead that. And quite candidly, many of these individuals who go to change our way of doing things, our basic ethos, will be educated and based in the humanities. Doesn't matter what they go on to do, and that was demonstrably shown in our spectacular symposium on the humanities on January 17th. Really, we need people whose minds open up to the possibility of doing greater things. I'm going to talk about campus life and how we role model a fairer society. Student experience is not limited to sitting in a classroom or studying in the library. Every decision adopted by our administration or the faculty should deliver a loud and clear message to the student, every step we can, and should be scrutinized by them. So we had better make sure that we always model the correct AUB values that have made this place what it is. I'm going to disagree with a lot of you. In a non-ugly sense, I am a disagreeable person or disagreeing person. I think you two who know me will know that I don't concede easily. But I think discussion, disagreement is at the core of what we do, and the students should feel that they have the right to hold us accountable in a good way. Let's start with the equity issue that's been on the agenda for decades, if not centuries. I was the 13-year-old boy who won the student essay in high school in the US for writing about the superiority of women because my mother had ingrained me with that. I got quite a beating from the football team for winning that essay. But despite everything that's been done to demand gender equity in this society, we see double standards everywhere, extending to our politicians, policymakers, business leaders, all of whom pay lip service but are clear in their failure to apply it in all their areas. Who are our overwhelmingly male political class to set a quota of 30% participation to ensure that they're doing a good job ensuring the representation of women in Parliament? Why is it not 50 or 55%? Who decided that's enough to promote gender equity? Why do we insist on quotas anyway for confessional allegiances, flawed and meaningless as they may be, but we flout all logic when it comes to the 50% of the population who are women? It seems to be more important to pick a proportionate number of each sect from each region than it does to pick a proportionate number of women in politics here and elsewhere. It doesn't make any sense to me. Look at the result. There's a raft of unfair and unjust laws affecting women. Think of the fact that marital rape is legal in the Arab world's only real democracy. It's disgraceful. Think about how a rapist can get away from punishment if he marries his victim. Think about the hundreds and thousands of women who are not protected against domestic abuse in their own homes. Think of those other rights that women lack, such as conferring citizenship to their own children. And now think of the power that you can have by showing young women while they're here that that's just not right, that that's not acceptable, that their rights are substantially more than they're being taught. What do universities have to do with this, you might think? Well, while we can't draft laws, it doesn't mean we can't influence them to a great extent. We should be doing everything we can to establish equity on campus and in the ranks of our faculty and staff. In fact, we've offered our services as consultants, as experts, to the government and future governments to serve as experts as a university, free of cost, to help ensure better laws, that better laws are drafted, that better laws are approved and implemented, as our Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences, Iman Wahid, has done in his laws protecting children. But to do that, we have to establish equity on campus and in the ranks of our faculty and staff first. We don't want to be guilty of saying, do as I say, not as I do. First, we have to empower our women leaders. Second, we have to set great examples while hiring people on no gender basis. We have outstanding female professors, female leaders in the administration, but not enough. Deans, yes. I want each and every young woman attending AUB to look up to people like Nadia Al-Sheikh. Nadia is a great scholar in her field with a magnificent sense of professionalism and humanity. And last year, she became the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, which is our oldest, largest, and most challenged faculty in that they have to teach the most, and in many ways, they're rewarded the least of these 6 across campus. Why did she take on that position? Why didn't she just continue to be successful academically? She took on the position not just because she's a woman, but because she's the best qualified and she wants to make a difference. We have to want to make a difference. I think that's an inspiring message that both our men and our women need to learn. Let them go into the world knowing that when a person is qualified, of whichever gender they can, they should get the position they deserve. And we don't want to create something like the National Football League has. I have the Super Bowl on the mind since I have 1 child born in Boston, 2 born in Houston, and they grew up in Atlanta. So the NFL, the National Football League, has a program where before you hire head coach, you have to interview minorities. But still the minorities for a league in which the vast majority of players are African American are massively underrepresented in management. So I don't believe in just pretend searches, in just pretend measures. If we're going to enact a measure, we should live by it. So we know we've made progress, but we have not achieved everything we should from the perspective of gender equity. We've raised the banner of female empowerment at AUB in full recognition that there's still an imbalance, and we had the task force on the lives and careers of women faculty present to us. They're presenting to the Board of Deans on February 16, and then we intend to implement their objectives. Women are underrepresented in the most senior jobs and overrepresented in lower ranking ones, and we have to fix that. But hand in hand with the recognition is that discrimination remains a major problem, however hard we try to root it out. What we are doing is trying to foster a culture of mutual respect and tolerance in which anyone and everyone feels they're getting a fair shot, an equal share in terms of education and future opportunities. Again, we can't change the overall view of the society, but we can set an example of how our societies should be. At AUB, our students find the liberty to be whoever they want to be. According to our non-discrimination policy, and I want to read this carefully, AUB prohibits discriminatory harassment on the basis of race, color, religion, age, national or ethnic identity, gender or gender identity, marital status, disability, genetic predisposition or carrier status, alienage or citizenship status, political affiliation, or any other characteristic protected by law. This is exactly what I meant when I sent the memo on Monday saying that our principles and the principles of the Founding Fathers are at odds with this memo that is differentiating people based on their country of national origin and perhaps their religion. These are not merely words or window dressing. We do embrace differences and diversity. A quick look at our Students' Club would tell you about the culture of AUB. We have a club for women's rights, a club for gender and sexuality, a club under the name of Empowerment Through Integration that strives to alter the sympathetic perception towards people with physical disabilities in society. Their mission statement reads, "Inclusion of all is a value for all." I think those are admirable words. Inclusion of all is a value for all. And these are the values we seek to plant in our students and the kinds of values we so critically miss in our societies. I think it's very important for students and staff to know that when faced with discrimination, they have the right to find a support and a suitable mechanism to make sure justice is served. Initiatives such as Title IX are very, very important to enhance the quality of the journey of any university's community. Title IX of the U.S. Education Amendments, which was enacted in 1972, is a gender equity law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex or gender, but it was written as sex, in all U.S. federally funded educational programs and activities. AUB is a recipient of U.S. government funding for scholarships through USAID and MEPI and other channels, and we have to and we will follow this law. The Title IX guidelines provide high standards and best practices to follow in terms of sex or gender discrimination, including harassment. These policies apply to all programs and all activities of AUB across its entire campus and all its affiliates, on campus, off campus, medical center, arts and sciences. And we want people to know that if they faced any type of harassment or know someone who has, they should report this to Trudy Hodges, our Title IX officer, and seek help. And believe me, the university has the obligation to respond, and we will respond. Diversity on campus plays a major role in teaching tolerance and preparing the students for the real world. And we want to make universities a sample of the overall community. So we have to make sure that this is accessible to the overall community. We can't keep walling off AUB from the rest of the world. At AUB, we have a large group of international students who attend the university, be it as full-time students or visitors. I applaud the exchange programs we have available through our Office of International Programs. They facilitate the ways for international students to learn about us and for our students to learn about many different cultures. 21% of our students are international students. Universities should make policies to facilitate this exchange of culture, making students understand that they're meeting people of different cultures and how difficult it is for people coming from different cultures to integrate here or anywhere else. But at a minimum, these programs have to help students understand the other in order to make them better global citizens. Diversity is not just defined by gender or by the number of foreign nationalities we have on campus. Making the university accessible to the whole Lebanese community has been a real challenge we continue to face. You've heard me say this time and again, and I want to thank Dana Abed, who's done a wonderful job with Martin Asser putting the speech together, making sure I'm consistently saying the same thing, if in slightly different words, because consistency is part of success. Making the university accessible to the whole community has been a major economic problem. With the spiraling cost of higher education, not just here or elsewhere, we are starting to be economically intimidating for some of the people who should and do strive to come to AUB for their education. But through our fundraising campaigns, such as the new boldly launched AUB, we've been able to increase financial aid for most of our needy students. And I want to applaud the prior administration of Peter Dorman, Ahmed Dalal, because they made this the focus of their administration to increase fundraising. But the cost went up. We're fortunate to have institutional funding from the US government, as well as MasterCard, Al Khuri, ULIP, and others. And this allows hundreds of needy students to come to AUB with a full scholarship. But we have a lot of students who are just above that poverty line, who don't qualify for a full scholarship, who desperately would benefit from coming here, and they would benefit our societies. Our prime concern, frankly, has been to make sure that AUB doesn't become a university for the economically elite rather than the intellectually elite. Elite, not elitist. Maybe this is one of the greatest problems our society faces in Lebanon or even the region at this moment. We see that people who don't get our type of education, and there are very few universities that offer AUB's open and really enlightening type of education. We see people discriminate against each other, forgetting or ignoring the common roots that we all have. I find it a little bit alarming when some of our students who show such great tolerance and acceptance of those from other countries turn against one another, because even though they come from the same land, they can come from different sects or different socioeconomic classes. I don't see much of that on AUB, but I occasionally see enough of it that it worries me. We can't tolerate this. We don't want to punish it, but we want to teach people out of this kind of thinking, out of this behavior. The light of the university has to be one that shines for all classes, all sects, all communities, all genders, and all nations. So I want to turn to something that we do especially well, and something I'm particularly proud of. Two student activities that I think are extraordinary are our journal, our newspaper Outlook, and our student elections. I'm very impressed with Outlook. I have to say, I read it, and I see that the articles are as critical as anything I can read, whether in Arabic or English, in the press here. Lately with Nadim Ladki as editor-in-chief of Daily Star, it started to reflect his edgy personality that I've known since age 10. But Outlook is edgy in a good way. It's positive, it's critical, but you don't have to have an interpreter of Arabic or philology to understand what they mean. The other thing that I'm very proud of is our student elections. The students find it a very, very tense period. The security forces are deployed in numbers at our gates, expecting confrontations that fortunately almost never happen. And many students take it really seriously. That's good. They should take it seriously, because there's an absence of real democratic electoral systems in Lebanon and the Middle East. So they take the time to prepare campaigns and advertise their political agendas, and they developed a proportional electoral law. You can see the various Lebanese leaders bashing each other on the definition of proportionality, but our students did it in 6 weeks over Christmas break without ripping each other through Outlook. Debates are organized between different groups. Candidates have to demonstrate why they're deserving of their peers' votes. I think this democratic scene is painfully absent outside of our campus. But we hope one day our graduates, the leaders of the future, will be able to apply what they once learned and practiced during their journeys as students at AUB and go out and change Lebanon and the Arab world. Through this experience, they should be able to eventually erase sectarianism and hopefully create a more tolerant, secular society. I want to talk about reaching out, about the impact of university on societies. And here, this is my fourth category, I want to end by addressing how the initiatives that start on campus pierce our outer walls and find niches in a society that badly need help. Societies badly need help and support in so many areas. They don't necessarily need lectures, they need help. So the shocking figures that I read to you earlier of regional human displacement are really magnified enormously in Lebanon, which has the highest number of refugees per capita per population anywhere in the world. We have just been through an exercise recently that was showcased in our outstanding AUB for Refugees Forum last week that was co-led by IFI's Nasser Yassin and Associate Provost Hala Muhtasib, in which we gathered data on all the programs and initiatives focusing both on the challenges of the refugees and the challenges of the host communities. The running total of dedicated initiatives is almost 70 across our 7 schools and faculties in our interdisciplinary institutes. Everything from studying patterns of fertility, preterm labor, enabling safer outcomes in pregnancy, helping Syrian women navigate the Lebanese healthcare system through community radio broadcasts, school nutrition projects helping to counter food insecurity, developing special latrines for temporary camps that protect our environment, and finding better uses of solid waste for our refugees than our government has so far found for the rest of the nation. I also mentioned the pitiful rates of civic engagement among Arab youth. That's not true on this campus, which in the past year has been recognized internationally for the qualities of citizenship and outreach. I never get tired of singing the praises of the Light Up a Village project, which last year brought renewable energy street lighting to one of the most remote and deprived villages in North Lebanon. They say charity begins at home, but so does determination. Or one of our longest running and most impactful initiatives, the Tamam Project, which is run from our extraordinary Department of Education, creating a whole new language and methodology for recognizing and reviving struggling secondary schools. Do you all remember the days when people would say, Lebanon is top 3 in science education. Lebanon is top 5 in science education. Lebanon is... Our secondary education is deteriorating at an alarming rate. And as I told the former Minister of Education, I'm not sure that cutting 40 school days out of 180 is the solution to improving it. So why is the Tamam journey really effective? Because it's bottom up. It's the teachers, the principals, and the parents themselves who select their own improvement needs, set their own goals, design and plan their own interventions, and evaluate and document their own work. So they're stakeholders in the improvement of their schools. Tamam and so many other AUB initiatives are at the polar opposite of the top-down, rigid governmental influence that's so prevalent in our region, where whatever change does occur, sadly, is often change for change's sake. Our approach at the nexus between academia and societal impact can ensure that our interventions are more evidence-based, more enduring, more participatory, and more genuinely self-sustaining and self-spreading. Every one of these dialogues between the AUB community, faculty, staff, students, alumni, with the outside world is a critical step towards a more cohesive, healthier, fitter, stronger, and fairer society. And it works both ways. It benefits the members of the communities and those whom they serve, and it benefits us because we are creating a better society for us to live in. So in conclusion, I want to stress the importance of cohesion in society. I've always been a true believer in nonviolence. It's not a party political stance. As many of you know, I don't belong to any political party in Lebanon, and the party I belong to in the United States just massively lost the election. This is for our survival as a people. Just as we are guests and custodians of the planet Earth, if we permit or contribute to the destruction of our own environment, as the song goes, we will all go down together. In the same way, we can't continue the trend of wealth distribution such that today, the world's 8 richest multi-billionaires own the equivalent of the poorest 50% of citizens of the planet. Let me repeat that. 8 people own as much wealth as 4 billion people. This is not just an affront to social justice. It threatens our entire culture and civilization. Economics, fair economics, are at the foundation of fair societies. What happens when those at the bottom get more and more numerous and poorer? Without social order, can we survive as a species? Do we sit back and write award-winning papers on this phenomenon, or we do something? I think the latter. Universities play roles that are crucial. We need them to keep society healthy and alive. Typically, higher education institutions focus on one of two very different strategic objectives. One is the need to build the leaders and citizens of tomorrow, and the other is to build buildings. Administrations will say that we're going to do this one now, and we're going to do the other one later. But it has become very evident in the last few months, we have to build citizen leaders for tomorrow and the buildings at the same time under fairly daunting economic and political circumstances. It is not an either-or process for AUB. It is a how-to process, and a how-to process now. So affordability, excellence, elimination of gender disparities, ensuring accessibility for all people, education for sustainable development, and embracing and enhancing diversity. That is what this university stands for, and I'm convinced that it's only through the perpetuation and propagation of these principles that we can build a truly fair and just society. We recently elected a US president who, to some people's surprise, is doing everything he said he would on the campaign trail. I think that is the one thing we have in common with them. We are going to do everything we said we would do, because I don't think we can afford to do any less. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this wide-embracing lecture. It's a tour de force, actually. You shared your reflections on how universities impact society, their role in fostering the values of social justice, but you also shared with all of us your insights on the dark realities of this part of the world, especially those related to youth and youth unemployment. And last but not least, you've shared with all of us, especially with our guests from abroad, what AUB is trying to be under your leadership, how AUB is faithful to the values that it tries to uphold. So thank you so much, and I know that you have many other things you have to attend to. With a lecture like this, I don't think we need to have a Q&A session. I'll thank you all, and then we'll move to the coffee break. Thank you so much.
This was the time.